G'day, it's Mark and welcome back to the channel. If you haven't already, please do subscribe, and that way you won't miss out on a future episode. In this episode, in the Commodore Auto History series, we look at the VR. The Holden VR Commodore was produced from July 1993 until April 1995, and the car was assembled at the South Australian plant at Elizabeth. The development cost for the new VR Commodore range was $100 million. The VR Commodore was certainly a major departure from a styling point of view from the previous generations of Commodore. At the front, it featured slimline headlights, no doubt influenced by the Opel Calibra, while at the rear, the smooth lines were well integrated with high-mounted taillights. And the car really did have a very modern, sleek and smooth appearance, very well integrated as a design. And this also reflected in the popularity and the sales of the VR Commodore. It was a very successful model. Also new from a styling point of view was the DLO, which is the daylight opening, the window area around the side of the car, with a very integrated C-pillar. This was all new. There was also round rear wheel arches instead of the squared off wheel arch that had been used on the previous VN and VP model Commodores. As part of the redesign, Holden also introduced wheel arch flares, and this enabled them to revise the suspension to add 40 millimeters to the car's footprint, because Commodores had been criticised in the past of having too narrow a track in standard format. The VR Commodore was also the first Australian-made car with a driver's side airbag. The VR launched slightly before its main rival, the Ford Falcon ED. The ED was a warmed-over version of the EA design, and the Holden certainly had a far more modern appearance. The cars were available in sedan, wagon, and utility variants. Engine choices varied depending upon the model. For example, it started at a 2.6L dual-ram inline six-cylinder. That was for export only, mainly to the Asian markets. There was the 3.8-litre V6, the 5-litre Holden V8, and then there was a 5.7-stroker V8 available on some Holden special vehicle models. Engine output for the VR V6, which is the Buick-derived engine, was 130 kilowatts, and for the 5-litre V8, 165 kilowatts. The HSV option XX1 was available on standard Holden 5-litre V8s, and that took the power up to 185 kilowatts. That was available on Commodore Executives, Bellinas, Calais, SSs, and also Statesman and Caprice models. A 5-speed manual transmission was available, and then there was also a new electronic version of the Turbo Hydromatic 700R4, the Turbo Hydromatic 700, and that was introduced, and that was known as the GM 4L60-E. The VR Commodore was also named Wheels Car of the Year for 1993. The new electronic automatic transmission also shaved 3 kilograms from the weight of the previous transmission. And the new auto box was controlled by the same all-new computer, which also manages the engine, which was an IPCM6. And that had 64 kilobytes of memory, which was 4 times more than the previous VP Commodore computer. The transmission was able to modify itself so that the shifts at 100,000 kilometers were just as smooth as those at 10,000 kilometers. And there was also a limp home mode in case the transmission suffered a failure. The model range consisted of the Commodore Executive, and that was available in sedan or wagon. It was mainly aimed at fleet customers. Power steering, electric side mirrors, 4 disc brakes were standard. The automatic transmission was available as an option. In terms of limited editions, there was a Holden Commodore Equip, and that was introduced in 1995, and that was a Series 2 model, available either in sedan or wagons, and that was based on the Executive. For the VR series, Holden added a new model called the Acclaim, and this was sitting 1 notch above the Executive and below the Bellina. And the Acclaim was a safety-focused family vehicle. It was based on an automatic transmission version of the Executive, and it featured anti-lock brakes, independent rear suspension, driver's airbag, and cruise control as standard. Although the Acclaim came standard with automatic transmission, a buyer could, by taking an Executive with manual transmission and adding ABS, IRS, and airbags, effectively have a manual version of the Acclaim. It wasn't badged that way. The release of the Holden Acclaim model reflected the fact that manufacturers were really focused a lot more on safety. Next in the range was the Commodore S, which was really a sports version or a sporty version of the Executive, and that retained its 3.8 litre V6 engine. The performance offering was the Commodore SS. That was similar to the S in terms of trim levels, interior trim and so on. And it featured the Holden 5 litre HEC 5000i V8. It had unique SS alloy wheels, and you could buy that as a 5-speed manual or a 4-speed automatic. The entry-level luxury version was the Holden Berliner, and that came standard with unique alloy wheels, electric windows, upgraded interior trim, and automatic transmission. And that was available also in sedan and wagon form. Top of the range was the Holden Calais, which featured unique enhancements such as alloy wheels, automatic climate control, independent rear suspension, driver's airbag, anti-lock brakes. These were all standard. The velour trim or an optional leather interior. And of course, power windows, central locking, all the things you'd expect in a luxury variant. The Calais had a standard 3.8 litre V6 or an optional 5 litre V8. And I should mention that also applied to the Berliner range and also the Executives as well. A Holden Ute was also available, and this was available as a standard Ute or an S, and also was available with either the 3.8 litre V6 as standard or a 5 litre V8, and that was available with the 5-speed manual or the 4-speed automatic. As part of the VR styling upgrade, it's worth mentioning that the cars also came in for new interiors, new door trims, and an all-new dashboard and steering wheel, which really, again, had that nice organic integrated design theme. As part of the joint venture between Holden and Toyota, there was a Toyota Lexan T3 version of the Commodore, and that was available in as a Newport or as a CSI, and it was available in sedan and wagon form. Pretty minor differentiation between the two: wheels, hubcaps, grills, things like that, but very, very similar car. These were a hard sell. The Holden had trouble selling the rebadged things like the Holden Apollo, the Novas, although the wide-body Camry was certainly a better car to sell for Holden than what the earlier series was. And equally, Toyota did not sell many of the Lexans. People that wanted Commodores tended to just buy them from the Holden dealer. Apparently, the reliability of the Lexans were not as good as what Toyota dealers and customers were used to. And apparently the number of technical service bulletins, recalls, and customer service exercises on Holden-supplied Lexus exceeded the similar number compared to Toyota models by more than 5 to 1. In terms of dimensions, the Holden Commodore was 4,861 millimetres long, which is 15 foot 11 inches. It was 1,794 millimetres wide, which is 5 foot 11 inches. It had a wheelbase of 2,731 millimetres, which is 8 foot 12 inches, and had a height of 1,400 millimetres, depending on the model, 4 foot 7 inches. The weight, again, for the base car was 1,420 kilograms, or 3,131 pounds. They use 15-inch wheels, depending on the model again. Standard cars, 15-inch wheels, had a turning circle of 10.7 metres or 35 foot 1 inch. And of course, there was also an extensive range of Holden special vehicles. And HSV was really coming into its own around this period of time with these models, with more established model lines, rather than lots of options and bits and pieces, which I think was the case with some of the early HSVs. So there was the Club Sport, which was powered by a 185 kilowatt 5-litre V8 engine. That was the entry level for the HSV range. And a total of 1,117 sedans were produced, as well as 77 wagons. The wagons, that'd be a very rare car these days, I think. I can't remember the last time I saw a VR Club Sport wagon on the road. And the Club Sport was available as either manual or automatic transmission. Then you go to the GDS, and that came with the 6-speed manual or the optional 4-speed automatic. And the engine in that was stroked from 5 litres to 5.7, and that produced 215 kilowatts, which is 288 horsepower, and 475 newton meters of torque, which is 350 foot-pounds, and 277 GDSs were produced. Then you had the luxury variant, that was the Senator, and the rear seating was taken from the Holden Statesman. And along with the rest of the HSV range, the Senator body kit was that was done by designer Ian Callum, who went on to head up Jaguar design. And it was a more sleeker, more aggressive, but integrated design, less probably add-on sort of body kits. And he did a very, very good job with that car, no doubt about it. The Senator came with a 185 kilowatt, 248 horsepower version of the 5-litre as standard. There was a new suspension setup that was developed that was known as the Touring Package, and that was aimed at providing a more capable ride but still maintaining, or capable handling but still maintaining, a comfortable ride for that more luxury sort of orientation. And then from May 1994 onwards, the Senator could also be optioned up with HSV's new 215 kilowatt or 288 horsepower 5.7 litre stroker V8, and that was known as the 215i. And that was a $10,000 engine package, but the engine was hand-built as an upgrade over the standard HSV engine. And that engine could be had with either the 4-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual transmission. And 0 to 100 or 60 miles an hour took 7.8 seconds for the 185, and it was 7.3 seconds for the 215. And the total number built of both versions was 855 units. And then there was the VR Series Maloo Ute, and that was released in August 1993 with the new front-end sheet metal. The rear of the Utes, as per the Holden, was pretty well carryover from the previous VP Ute. But it also had the new interior as per all the VR models. And the 5-litre engine was available in that. There were no strokers in the Maloos, but the 5-litre V8 was available. That's, again, the 185 kilowatt, 248 horsepower, and 156 examples of the VR Maloo were made. Just going back to the GDS for a moment on the 215 engine, that also was mated to, I think I mentioned, the 6-speed manual transmission, which was the T56 Tremec. But it also came with what was known as a Hydra-Track limited slip differential. A Series 2 model was launched in September 1994. As part of the Series 2 upgrade that I mentioned earlier, there were the usual specification enhancements, updated wheels, things like that. But the thing I remember was on the level 2 cars upwards, in other words, the Bellina and the Calais, from a sedan perspective, they started illuminating the taillights that were actually in the boot area itself. So you had sort of a much nicer look at the rear end. And I think, when I think back to VR, I thought that's a very, as I said, well integrated, very smooth design. The car was very, very successful. I remember when I was at Holden, we normally applied bonuses to cars to move them along, and for VR, I don't recall any factory bonus being offered to dealers on VR Commodore, simply because it was so successful it just didn't need any bonuses at all. The only bonus it got was when you run a car out as part of the dealer agreement, you have to provide dealers with a liquidation allowance, and so that is to help dealers sell any old model stock when the new model comes out. So that's the only bonus that I'm aware of that we applied to VR. So when the VS came out, and I'll cover that in a future episode, then whatever stock was left, the dealers received a liquidation allowance bonus. I can't remember what it was. Might have been $1,200 or $1,500 a car, something like that, just to help them trade out of those cars. But it was completely unnecessary, and it was money for jam because, also Holden didn't have to spend a lot of money because there wasn't that many VRs left in stock anyway. So the cars they did pay the liquidation allowance on were very, very small. And that was a very good time for Holden, very profitable as well. And customers clearly loved the VR Commodore. A total of 165,262 VR Commodores were built. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode on the Holden Commodore VR as part of our auto history series. Certainly a very successful model, and it was very different from any Opel product. It was really a car in its own right. So thanks very much for watching. Please hit the like button. It definitely helps the channel. It's easy to do, takes a second, and it really does make a big difference. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so that way you won't miss out on a future episode. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.